Atik for giving me this opportunity to come here and share some of my perspectives on the theme that we are going to discuss today. So just allow me to share my screen. Okay. So I hope my screen is visible. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So here, before I start, I think it's a session here. So yeah, so this is the NEP orientation and sensitization program, which you all know. This is one of the very ambitious programs of the UGC, where we are trying to reach out to over 15 lakh teachers across various higher educational institutions, because it has been almost 5.5 years since this national education policy document was released. And still, there are many confusions, or I should say, also challenges that we as teachers are facing in its implementation. And education being in the concurrent list, that means that both it is governed both by the state and the central government. And in the different states, uh, the dates of implementation might have been different. Some were quick or fast to adopt it, and some have only recently adopted it. But all of us are more or the less, we are sailing on the same boat. And there are many themes, basically 10 themes that has been identified by the UGC, and one of the important themes is the Indian knowledge systems, right? And in today's session, I will just be giving some, you can say, introductory part of it about what is exactly Indian knowledge systems, what are its various sources, and why it is important for us to include in it in our curriculum. Now, before I proceed further, I would just like to give you a glimpse of our university, the institution where I am presently associated with. That is Pandit Ravi Shankar Shukla University, which is located in the capital city of Chhattisgarh, Raipur. And I would like to know, yeah, whether I should continue in English or should I be bilingual during the session?
No, ma'am, you can continue in English.
English,
Yeah.
okay. So, yeah, thank you. So, one more purpose for sharing this screen with you is to also let you know about our motto of a university and the Dhey Vakya or the motto of a university. This is taken from one of the ancient, and it says Agne Nai Supatha Rai. And if we go by its translation, it means, O fire, that is, O Agni, lead us on a virtuous path to prosperity. So, as teachers, we may be associated with any of the institutions, but you will agree with me that our major goal or objective always remains to not only to educate and empower our students, but also to make sure that they are following a virtuous path wherever they go or whatever roles that they may be playing in their future lives. So, with this context, I would like to proceed further and also to share with you one of the important quotes, who is actually known as the pioneer or who actually coined this term of Indian knowledge systems or the Indian knowledge traditions. That is Professor Kapil Kapoor. Have you heard about his name, Professor Kapil Kapoor? He was a professor, he's a retired professor from the JNU, and he was the one who has done extensive work on the documenting of the Indian knowledge systems and Indian knowledge traditions. And this is what he has observed, that India's knowledge tradition, it is not something very new, but it is very ancient and it has been uninterrupted, just like the flow of the river Ganga, as he said, because from Vedas or the Upanishads to Sri Aurobindo, the knowledge or the jnana that has been at the center of all our rational or speculative inquiry in the country, right? And when we are referring to or when we are talking about Indian knowledge traditions, there are three terms that we hear a lot. And if it is very important that we have to understand what actually these terms indicate, that is darshana, jnana, and vidya. And it is also true to admit at this point that there are no equivalent words which can translate these terms into English. And talking about or using the term darshan system, that is ultimately the point of view or the perspective which leads to jnana, that is the knowledge, right? And when this knowledge is gathered in a particular domain or in a particular area, when it is organized and it is presented in a very systematic manner for the purpose of, say, reflection or for the pedagogies, then we term it as a vidya or the discipline, right? Now, coming to what is actually Indian knowledge systems and why it is important, because it has been understood and considerable importance has been placed on it in our this national education policy document. And why the need was felt is because it was accepted that it is very important for us to revive the lost knowledge and overcome the discontinuity. I'm not going into the details about why and how this discontinuity happened during the last, you can say, few hundred of years. You can say the due to say foreign invasions and the British rule, their policies or something like that, you can say, which has resulted in the uh, discontinuity or the regular manner in which the knowledge was transmitted through generations. And that is why it is important. And the national education policy has also emphasized, and we all will agree with it, that Indian society, it has been a treasure trove of knowledge. And this knowledge is not something very new or very recent, but it has been gained over thousands of years. And if we look around, we will see that it is manifested in different ways. It is manifested in the form of arts, in our literature, in our traditions, in our cuisine, in our customs, in our languages, in our architecture. Everywhere you will see that there is an imprint of the Indian knowledge systems or traditions. And these practices, these were developed by the Indians, and they were, and the development of these, you can say, traditions or arts or practices, these were refined over centuries and they were passed on from one generation to another. That is why we also observe that they made many forms of art or many traditions or many knowledge systems, they are not documented, but rather we see that they have been passed on from one generation to another, or we can say that they are part of a Shruti Parampara, or which is the non documented, but that has been transmitted orally from one generation to another. However, this process of intergenerational transfer of information or knowledge, that has there has been abrupt, you can say, uh, loss of this knowledge in the last few centuries. And that is why we also see that the NEP 2020 has been laying special emphasis on the promotion of Indian languages, arts, and culture, because many of these ancient traditions or art forms, or they are presented or they are available in the local languages. And if we lose these languages, along with that language, we may be losing our rich source of knowledge also. So that is how we see that the NEP has been trying to remove this discontinuity in the flow of IKS, and it has been felt that there is no better way than to revive this IKS or to prevent its loss, but by integrating them into our curriculum at all levels of education. And ultimately, it is also very important for us to understand that as teachers, as faculty members, we are one of the most important stakeholders, because the success or the failure of this policy ultimately rests on our shoulders. And that is, it is also important that unless we as teachers, we are not aware about it, what is the importance or what is the significance of IKS, I think we may not be doing justice about how to include it or how to integrate it in our curriculum. So this is not what has been observed in UGC guidelines for training of faculty on IKS. Because there are so many sources of knowledge. There has been, I hope I'm audible. There is some connectivity issue at my end, but I hope I am audible, and
Yes, ma'am, you
there
are
is
audible,
no,
but the
yes.
sound is breaking sometimes. Your audio is
Okay.
breaking sometimes.
Okay. So you all might have heard about this name patent case, right? Yes, anyone of you? The name patent case, there was this US company, WR Grace, which went for the European patent for a fungicidal neem oil formulation. And in this context, many of the Indian and international groups, they raised or they opposed this patent, because we all know that neem and its properties, that has been known to us since a very, very long time. And it has been also used for its these fungicidal properties for different applications. And one of the important there are three important criteria for any patent to be granted. What are those three criteria? Yes, participants.
Novelty, innovative state, and applicability.
G.
Novelty,
Novelty.
innovative
Yes.
case, innovative state, and applicability.
Yes, it is novelty. And one is the non-obviousness. And third one is the utility. So it was contested that there was no novelty for this patent, because this has been known for a long, long time. And it was on this ground that ultimately the European Patent Office, on the grounds that this application or this formulation of neem oil was not something new, but it was based on the traditional knowledge. So, another important case that has gained much of publicity is about the turmeric patent case. And similarly, in the US, one of the US companies, it basically it was they went for the patent. They got the patent for the turmeric in the wound healing. And we all know that, and we have been using turmeric as a part of our, you can say, even as a home remedy also for its various anti-inflammatory and wound healing properties. And it was on this ground, under that time, under the leadership of Professor R.A. Marshalkar, who was the Director General of the CSIR at that time, he successfully challenged this US patent on the grounds that this was not something new, but it was based on the traditional knowledge. So ultimately, this was revoked in 1997, and for that, as an evidence, the CSIR gave over 32 references, including many ancient Sanskrit texts, which proved that turmeric has been used in India for centuries for this very purposes. So, with these two cases, you can say that these are some of the landmark rulings or cases which demonstrated that traditional knowledge could be protected from biopiracy. So, that is how, in the present times, it is very important that we have to be aware about these were some very common, you can say, components or common substances which is known to everyone, and that is why you can say it could be successfully, it came into our attention and it was successfully contested. But there are many such knowledge systems or which stands the risk of biopiracy. So that is why it is very important for us to be aware about what is our Indian knowledge systems, what are our Indian knowledge traditions, because unless and until we ourselves are aware and we can include that as a part in our curriculum and we are making aware the students about it, there may be many such cases for which we may not be able to uh, contest, or we may not be able to revoke those patents also. So whenever like we are saying that our Indian knowledge traditions are very uh, valuable, or we have a very rich tradition of knowledge, sometimes it can appear like more of blowing our own trumpet, I should say. But when this validation comes from an external source, certainly we will stop and pay more uh, credibility to it. Certainly. So that is why here I'm sharing one of the quotes by Albert Einstein, who very rightly observed that we owe a lot to the Indians who taught us how to count, without which no worthwhile scientific discovery could have been made. So this is how you will see that the national education policy is also mentioning that the heritage of ancient and eternal IKS and thought, this has been the guiding light of our policy. And the pursuit of knowledge, that is jnana, wisdom, that is pragya, and truth, or the satya, that has always been considered as the Indian thought and philosophy. And this was considered as the highest goal that human can achieve. And it was in this context, you can say that Indian influence on the world. And there are these legacies, we should say, which were nurtured in this part of the world. This were preserved, they were researched, and they were put to uses. And unless and until it is not that we have to blindly adopt or we have to blindly uh, promote these systems. But it is very important that we have to research on it, we have to validate whether those claims can stand the test of time. And then only, I think, these will come into practice. But for that, it is very important that they should be made a part of our curriculum. So if we look back, we see that there has been number of influential thinkers in ancient India, whether we talk about Aryabhatta or Sushruta or Nagarjuna or Varahamihira, Charak or Vagabhat. There are number of such scholars and thinkers whose impact on our knowledge cannot be contested. And that is how, when in the NEP, when they are talking about knowledge of India, the knowledge of India includes the knowledge from the ancient India and its contributions to modern India. What are its success and challenges? And we also have to see how this can have an implication, or what contribution they can make in our education, health, environment, or other such areas. And when we are talking about ancient Indian traditions, this also includes the tribal knowledge. And because we are home to a number of indigenous people who have their indigenous or traditional ways of learning, their uh, traditional knowledge systems, and that is also included in this. And it also includes them in mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, yoga, architecture, medicine, agriculture, engineering, linguistics, literature, sports, games, as well as in governance, polity, and conservation. So, what NEP has been suggesting is that we also have to design some specific courses in tribal ethno-medicinal practices, forest management, traditional crop cultivation. There were no pesticides or chemical uh, fertilizers which were used, but how to go for the natural farming. So, such specific courses can be designed for the students so that they remain connected to our ancient traditions and knowledge systems. So, NEP has been emphasizing that in our curriculum, uh, we that has to be redesigned, and it has to be rooted in the Indian and local context and ethos in terms of culture, traditions, heritage, customs, language, philosophy, geography, ancient and contemporary knowledge, and also the societal and scientific needs and indigenous and traditional ways of learning. Because unless and until we are including these, I think it will be very difficult for us to make our education relatable, relevant, interesting, and effective for our students. Now, before I proceed further, I would like to again share one important quote by famous author Mark Twain, who very rightly observed that India is the cradle of human race, the birthplace of human speech, the mother of history, the grandmother of legend, and the great grandmother of tradition. Our most valuable and most constructive materials in the history of man are treasured up in India only. Now the question arises, like, what is IKS? So if some of you can just unmute and share, like, what do you basically understand by the IKS? What is IKS?
A Indian knowledge system like Vedic maths.
Indian knowledge systems, okay, like Vedic maths, okay. Okay, yes, it is. If someone
Basically, it talks about the knowledge system which has been built over the years in all aspects of your daily life, not just daily life, but in science, in medicines, everywhere. Like that's
That
the
is what it
overall.
is part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Anyone else would like to add something to it?
It's like as a tradition of India and
Tradition of India. Okay. Okay. Anyone
It
else?
might be a traditional Indian knowledge across the science, technology, arts, philosophy, maybe. So I just came across one video last week where they have shown how water has been transformed from the bottom level to the hills without any mechanical machines or something. So that kind of information is still there in our Indian culture, and knowledge has to be developed properly. Maybe that is a part.
Yes, okay. When we all have heard about this famous fable about blind men and the elephant, and because these identify this object, which was actually a elephant, and because these people, they have never seen or never known anything like elephant. They were trying to identify the object by merely on the basis of the portion that they could feel. For instance, the person who could feel the tail said that it is a snake. The person who touched the his body said that it is a wall. The person who could get hold of its limbs said that it is a pillar. The person who could get so similar is our this particular domain. So first and foremost, I think we should first understand that what is Indian knowledge systems. So we see that it is made up of three words. That is, if you break it down, that is Indian, knowledge, and systems, right? Now, to further understand what do we here mean by Indian, right? So when we are using the word Indian, it actually means the cultural Indian and not the political or the geographical label of the India as we know it today, right? So because at that time, when we are talking about India, it ranged from the Burma in the east up till the Afghanistan in the west, right? And the term here, Indian, that means the indigenous sources of knowledge which was generated by Indians, right? Now, who are these Indians? Indians, again, we should remember that it doesn't not refer to the people in the current context within the current geographical boundaries. So, the geographical label here actually means the undivided Indian subcontinent, that is the Akhand Bharat. And if we go by the demographic label, that means that the people who may not have been from this place, right? But they are born here or they have lived here for a very significant period of time where they have fully integrated into the native culture and practices. And they have also contributed from whichever part of the world they have came here. They have also contributed in the building of those culture or the practices, right? And in this context, we should also remember that there are many accounts other parts of the world. They have traveled to India, and they have shared their experiences, or they have documented their observations. But we should remember that whatever that they have documented, that is not IKS. That may be about IKS, right? So here you can say they are basically, they were foreigners, they were foreign travelers who came here, who observed the things here, and they have documented it. So whatever literature that they have contributed to, that is not IKS, but that you can say that it is about IKS. So I hope here the term now Indian is very clear to you, that it is Indian here refers to anyone who has been born here or who has lived here for a substantial period of time, and they have fully integrated in the native culture and practices, and they have also contributed, or there has been a amalgamation of their practices or of their culture. Second term that we use here is the knowledge. Now here the knowledge can be coming from the wisdom and insights which an individual can have from their experiences, from their observations, from the various experiments that they are doing, or they may be analyzing some data, or they may be validating it, and that can lead to its further improvement or augmentation. So the knowledge here, it can be both formal. Formal is whatever is present in the literary sources, right? But also informal, that some information it may not be present in any documented text or any literary sources. So whenever we are talking about knowledge, that includes both the formal and the informal knowledge, oral and the non-oral traditions also. And this knowledge actually pervades all the three domains, that is the spiritual, religious, and the social and day-to-day issues also. The third term that is the systems, right? So here the systems actually means when we are using the term system, that means that it is very structured way, that there is a very methodical. So there is a very structured methodology, and there is a classification scheme which is available to classify this corpus of knowledge. There is so many rich sources of knowledge, but that has to be structured in a suitable way. It has to be organized in a proper manner, which is useful for its transmission and for its preservation. So that with when we break this word of Indian knowledge systems, and when we understand the meaning of each word here, I think now we can better appreciate what actually the Indian knowledge systems signify, or what do they exactly mean. So this is the you can say how the Indian knowledge systems have been defined in the UGC guidelines for incorporating Indian knowledge in higher education curricula, where it says that Indian knowledge system encompasses all of the systematized disciplines of knowledge which were developed to a high degree of sophistication in India from ancient times, and all of the traditions and practices that the various communities of India, including the tribal communities, they have evolved, they have refined, and they have preserved over the generations. So whenever we are now, since we are hearing a lot about this term of IKS, but there are also many misconceptions that have been building around this term. So it is very important that we have to clearly understand what is IKS and what does not signify IKS. So one of the important myths or misconception is that IKS, it is a discipline, or it is a subject, or it is a specialization. That is not the case. Actually, IKS, this is a label that is given to a collection of disciplines which may be connected to each other to varying degrees. Similarly, sometimes we also mistake that IKS is Sanskrit, or IKS is only done by people who know Sanskrit or by Sanskrit people. So we have to accept that IKS or Sanskrit is just a language. IKS has been expressed in all the Indian languages. It is just the case that the number of uh, literature that is available in Sanskrit is considerably larger, but that doesn't mean that IKS is only meant for those people who know Sanskrit or who are only well versed in Sanskrit, or IKS is only available in Sanskrit text. That is also a wrong notion. Another misconceptions that we may carry is that IKS that includes all that is ancient. So that is also a wrong notion, because IKS includes all knowledge traditions of India, past and present, because this new knowledge, whatever new knowledge is being created, that is based on the, naturally, it is based on the principles that has been laid down by the scholars before. But that knowledge is evolving each day, that is being refined by the modern day scholars also. To say that IKS is ancient, that is also a wrong notion, or that is also a misconception. Another misconception is that IKS, it is only written by Hindus. Now, it actually now depends what we actually mean by Hindus. If we go back and see that the term Hindu, that was basically coined for the people who lived beyond the Sindhu River. And if we go and see that the IKS, there is a lot of IKS, no doubt, in the Hindu fold, if we mean by the religion, but lot of Jaina, Buddha, Sikh, and Muslim scholars, they have also contributed to the IKS. Similarly, it is also a myth that IKS is mainly spiritualism. That is also wrong, because IKS includes the empirical sciences also. India has made a significant contribution in the field of linguistics, in the fields of astronomy, in the field of health sciences, mathematics, metallurgy, and all the other sciences. Right. So, if so, to say that it is only associated with spiritualism, that is also a wrong uh, thought that we may be carrying. And it's also sometimes the over enthusiastic supporters or followers of IKS may say that IK has answers to all the problems of life. So that is also not right, because our ancient teachers, they did not give us all the solutions for all the problems. They only tried to answer or suggest solutions for the problems that were prevalent at that particular time. So, but for instance, in the current context, there may be some newer issues, newer challenges. So, for all those challenges, the answers are not available in the IKS. So, it is also important for us to be refrain from being over enthusiastic in supporting or in making such tall claims that IK has answers to all the problems. Similarly, sometimes it is also uh, some critics may say that IKS is it was only written by men, because that is wrong. There are many Indian texts that mention the name of many learned women who had written, contributed to our Indian knowledge systems. For instance, there are many women scholars for like the hymns of Rig Veda. They were compiled by many rishis, and that included the rishikas also. That is the female rishis, and Brahma Vadinis, that is who revealed the sacred mantras or the shlokas of the Brahma. So, for some of the names include the Romasa, Lopamudra, Kadru, Vishwavara, Ghosha, Juhu, Vagambari, Paulami, Jarita, Shraddha, Kamaini, Urvashi, Indrani, Savitri, Devyani. So there are many, many more women scholars who have contributed to these ancient texts as well. For instance, in the compilation of Samaveda, 4 women scholars are mentioned, right? So to say that the women were sidelined, that is also a wrong notion. Similarly, it is also sometimes the critics may say that the IKS that is driven by blind beliefs or dogmas, which are basically rooted in the religious context, because that is wrong. Because in our uh, tradition, there was this provision for arguing and counter arguing, for vad vivad. Whatever ultimately the objective was to reach to the truth, and this was achieved through vad vivad, you can say, and it was done in a very professional, rational, and an objective manner. And also to say that IKS is irrelevant or useless, that is also wrong, because that actually depends upon what we mean by the use. Because during the with the advancements of this technology, we can say that now we are having more tools, or better tools are available at our hand. But the attitude and the methodology, they are still relevant in the present times. So then now the question that ultimately the students may also have, and as the teachers also we may have, that why is there the need to include IKS in our higher education? So it is why it is important is because we have to instill that pride in our cultural heritage. Because unless and until uh, we appreciate our contributions, we appreciate what are the rich knowledge systems that we have been carrying. It is very important for our identity as well. And sometimes this with these IKs, we can also solve the modern day problems also. And it is also important for the holistic pedagogy, because when we are talking about the overall development or the holistic development of a student or an individual, that is also a way where the IKS can play an important role. There is also many ways in which IKS can be used for value-based education. There are many stories, Jata Kathains are there. There are stories of Panchatantras which have a lesson at its end that can also be used for the teaching pedagogies and for the value-based education. And this also gives us a way in which we can connect to the local culture, because each India, we are a very diverse country. The diversity is in terms of every imaginable aspect, whether we talk about the languages, the foods, the textiles, the cuisines, the architecture, the performing arts. There are so many of things are there. So when we are including these concepts or these parameters in our curriculum, certainly it also has and it also has the neuroscientific benefits also. And also because we can when nowadays there is so much focus is now being placed on experiential learning, that will I guess is also an important tool for achieving that end. So if we see that during the last centuries, as they say, there has been an erosion in our indigenous knowledge. And one of the main reason for this is there is we ourselves are unaware about it, as has been case with the neem patent or turmeric. contesting the turmeric claims of for the turmeric patent, that could be contested because we were aware about it. But there may be many, many more such products or such many things for which we may be unaware about, and this can be a severe loss to our intellectual property rights as well. Another reason has been the migration, because as the people are migrating from the, say, from the tribal areas to the bigger towns, or from the rural areas to the urban centers, slowly or steadily, you can say they are losing their touch with their local practices, local traditions. That has also been contributed as a reason for this loss. And then there is also about the gender equality, uh, because in many communities, the where the knowledge is passed on orally, sometimes this is only passed on to their sons. So if there is no male member in the lineage, sometimes this knowledge or this information may be lost forever. And also the modernization has also contributed to it, because somehow or the other, as we are adapting to newer lifestyles, we are adopting newer technologies, our food habits are changing. So that has also led to the loss of our indigenous knowledge. And certainly there is, when we, in the modern times, if you have to validate the claims that has been made in our Indian texts, we require the funds for it, and sometimes there may not be sufficient financial support for such for conducting research projects which can validate the claims of these Indian knowledge systems. And also there has been this generation gap has always been there, and it is always that the younger generation sometimes fails to identify itself with the ancient practices, or they may not feel connected to the old systems or old traditions, or the practices that might be followed. And also, there is no proper documentation of the IKS, because many knowledge traditions or many knowledge systems that has been passed only through the oral traditions. And in the absence of the literature available for it or the documentation, sometimes there can be a loss in this. And also, there is sometimes no open discussion was there before us, but now, as it has been included in the uh, uh, new education policy, and we have to integrate it within our curriculum, certainly now we are talking and we are discussing about it. So that is how we have to see to it that how IKS can assist us, or it can be a valuable tool in the holistic development of the students, whether we are imparting some knowledge to them, or uh, we are skilling them in our ancient forms of art or other such work. It also can be a important way in which we can instill civil responsibilities and values, and also the beliefs and habits, development of the character, personality, moral strength and excellence, sense of responsibility. And why is it important to preserve and diffuse a national culture, value and respect the shram or the labor? One of the important things has been the whatever ancient or the uh, skills were there, uh, there was not much respect was attached to that particular art form, and that is why we see that the uh, younger generation of people, they are moving away from them, and they are looking for other avenues for their employment, right? And also it also is a valuable tool where we are talking about innovation or startups or And these can also be a tool which can be successfully used for the innovation and for the startups as well. Now, it is also very important for us to, if we want to study IKS, we also should know that what are the various frameworks for classification. So there are number of forms for the classification of IKS, and one of the framework which has been mentioned in the Arthashastra, which says that there are four sciences, that is Anuviksiki, that is the science of inquiry, Trai, that is the Veda, Varta, that is the commerce or trade, and Dandaniti, that is the governance. So these four are considered as the basic four sciences. Another form of classification is the Chaturdasha Vidyasthana, or the 40 traditional disciplines. So in this context, the 14 traditional disciplines have been the Purana, Nyaya, Mimamsa, Dharma Shastra, Vedangas, six Vedangas, then four Vedas, and these 14 were considered as the roots of knowledge and dharma. And later on, four more have been added to it, that is Ayurveda, Gandharva Veda, Artha Shastra, and Dhanur Veda. And that is how the Ashtadasha Vidyasthana was established. Right now, there is these Chaturdasha Vidyasthanas in this, the four Vedas, which were basically transmitted, or they were part of the Shruti Parampara, that is the Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yajurveda, and Atharva Veda. Then six Vedangas, that is the Shiksha, Vyakarna, Chandas, Nirukta, Kalpa, and Jyotisha. Then Nyaya, that is the logic and epistemology. Then Mimamsa, that is the hermeneutics. Dharma Shastra, that is the social and the legal codes. And the Puranas, that is the creation and dissolution of universe, chronology of different Manus and dynasties, including the Itihasas, that is Ramayana and Mahabharata. The another framework for classification is based on the 18 shilps, that is the forms of art or skills, you can say. This is 18 shilps you can see here on your screen. These include some like vocal music, instrument music, dancing, painting, mathematics, accountancy, engineering, sculpture, agriculture, cattle breeding, commerce, medicine, law, administrative training, archery and military art, magic, snake charming, and poison antidotes. These were also considered as a shill, and the art of finding hidden treasures, right? Then there is something which has been also being placed considerable importance, that is the Chausat Kalaएं, or the Chausat means 64. So 64 forms of art. So Kala actually means the performing art. So it was considered that if an individual masters these 64 traditional art, it will, you can consider that person as a cultured individual in many parts of the ancient India. And because why these 64 forms are important is because they will benefit you, that will be useful for an individual in the worldly life. So these are these Chausat Kalaएं. You can see the numbers are, list is too long, but you can see that it included the Geet Vidya, that is the music Vidya, then there is this uh, art of making or solving riddles. Forms of art has been identified in the Chaussat Kalais, or 64 forms of art. Now, it is also important for us to understand, like, what are the various sources of Indian knowledge systems? Like, what are the various sources through which we can study or we can come to know about the Indian knowledge systems? So these can be basically classified into two sources. One is the literary sources, and second one is the non-literary sources. Literary sources, this includes the literature or the written part, you can say, and majority of them are in present in Sanskrit, and there are also certain non-Sanskrit sources also which are present in the Bauth, Jaina, and regional language sources are also there. There are many Arabic and Persian sources as well. Then there are also certain testimonials or secondary sources also. These testimonials or secondary sources are the people who have visited this part of the world, who have uh, noted down their observations, or they have made a commentary on the our ancient original these texts. So they are referred to as the secondary sources. Then there is the non-literary sources. Non-literary sources, this includes the archaeological. Then there are certain living practices also. So when we are talking about archaeological sources means the various sculptures or the monuments, because these sculptures or the monuments that can be dated back to ancient times, they give us indirect insight into the artistic expressions. Through their artistic expressions, we get an indirect information about the times that were existing at that particular time. Then also that also includes the literary and the historical text, because literary text offer indirect insight into the ancient Indian society. And then there are these excavated sites, and excavated sites, they offer direct material evidence of some weapons. These are found. That indicates that what were the materials that were used at that time, what were the designs, what were the methods that were used to prepare those particular materials. And there are these inscriptions and epigraphs, because these also give us, inscriptions give direct textual insights into the historical events. Right? Now, on your screen, you can see some archaeological sources. Can you identify what is this on your extreme left? Yes, participants, please. Because I cannot see any one of you. All your cameras are off.
Participants, I think we should go for the dialogues, not a monologue. And kindly open your cameras first. How much you are attentive at that is very much important.
Because you all are also teachers, na? And if you go into the class and you are not able to see to whom you are addressing, it creates a difficult situation for us how to connect with your audience, right? So
Please be
if you can
interactive only.
just, yeah,
Only 2 or 3 participants have opened their videos. Kindly open your videos first. Either it could not be possible to continue this session. It is not. It is not a proper way. Just open your videos and please interact. And please continue.
yeah, please. Thank you, sir, for that intervention. Yeah, please. Can you just have any idea what is this structure? Your extreme left. These are the temples of Hampi, and in Karnataka, where one important characteristic is that these are the musical pillars, right? These structures, these are made up of stone, and the pillars that you see here, if you hit these pillars, musical sounds come out of it. So it is just we have to think about it, about if some music is generated by hitting those pillars, the sculptures or the persons who made these temples or these structures, they were not only having good knowledge about how to carve, made these beautiful carvings, but they also had some understanding about the sound engineering, acoustics, right? And so that itself indicates the how advanced their understanding there was at that particular time. Now, can you identify this structure in the middle? This structure? This is the remains of the Nalanda University. Where is Nalanda University? Where was Nalanda University? And what is special about this place? It is a very common, common information that we all come across. Yes, please. There is nothing wrong or right. At least I will feel that you are here and connected to whatever we are sharing here. And what is the structure in the below this structure, Nalanda University? These are the remains of the ancient Nalanda University, and this is the campus of modern Nalanda University campus, right? And what is that you can see on your extreme right? It is written as the Takshashila, right? It is the oldest, first, finest, and the oldest known university in the world. And where is it located? Yes, please. Where is it located? Takshashila. Yes, please.
So
Yes, am
Bihar,
I audible?
Established in 477.
it was in Bihar, na?
Takshashila. Takshashila, it is in the modern day Pakistan, right? So, but that why it is considered here is because that was part of an ancient India, right? So that is also a rich source of, you can say, information about. We had such higher educational institutions where, for instance, in Nalanda, the scholars from around the world used to come here for studying, right? Then this is the site of Mohenjo-daro. What is special about Mohenjo-daro? What is it now we known as or famous for? Yes, participants, please speak out. Otherwise, I will not be able to take forward this session. I will also keep mum for the next 15 to 20 minutes. Yes, maybe some of you can just please speak out. Yeah.
Ma'am, Mohenjo-daro is mentioned as the oldest civilization.
Oldest civilization, okay. And what is its characteristic, I should say, when we use the term civilization?
It's their city planning and the other
Their
thing,
town planning.
town
Yeah,
planning.
their town planning,
Yes.
their drainage system, right? And they had these public
Public
paths, right?
courses. Yes.
Yeah, yes. So what is more striking here, you can see the structures that you see here. They are made up of these bricks, which are made up of uniform size. So that means they had some unit for the mass manufacturing of such bricks for the construction of these uh, places, right? Then on your left, right hand side, you can see this Rani Ki Vav. These are the step wells. So there are many more such structures that you can find in the Gujarat or Rajasthan, which are those areas which received very scanty rainfall. So these step wells. These were constructed for the uh, preservation of the rainwater, right? Rainwater harvesting, rain preservation of the rainwaters. So these structures, they were not only very beautiful carvings and structures was there, but they were created in such a manner that uh, the water, whatever is being collected, their evaporation is minimal, and they were used as community centers, and many such purposes were served by these step wells. Similarly, you can see that these are those idols, such Panchloha idols, and these are the sculptures which were traditionally crafted from a five metal alloy. That is gold, silver, copper, tin, and zinc, or iron was used. So the term Panchloha, Panch means five, and Loha means metal. So these metal idols were prepared by such beautiful carvings that you can see that were prepared by the lost wax casting method. So this lost wax casting method is where first there is rough, you can say, wax sculpture is made, and on that wax sculpture that is taken as the core, and around that core a fine layer of wax is then placed on it. So this is molded, or that takes the it is surrounding the those carved, you can say, wax models, and then this clay, this was then heated, and as you are heating, what happens is the clay is hardened, but the wax which is present inside, that melts away. Now, what we get is a cast which is made up of solidified clay. And inside this cast, now the molten metal is poured inside this. And then subsequently, the metal is cooled. And after the metal is cooled, this clay casing, this is broken. And what you get is a metal image, right? So this lost wax casting, this has been used for making such metal sculptures or metal statues. This is one very famous figurine that you might have come across, and this is the, you can say, the dancing girl of Mohenjo-daro, which is one of the earliest known Indian lost wax statues. And this has been dated back to 4,000 years to the Harappan culture of the Indus Valley. There are also many, many more such archaeological sites, whether we talk about the Delhi Iron Pillar, which is located near Qutub Minar in Mehroli. And the important characteristics of this metal uh, iron pillar is that it is rustless. You know, it is made up of iron, but it is having a such composition that even though it is exposed to atmosphere, moisture, heat, it has still remained rustless for over all these years. So such metal structures or iron pillars are also found at different sites, also in Mount Abu, in Dhar, Madhya Pradesh, in Bhubaneswar, Konark, uh, and Puri also, and these Puri, Konark. We know that these are besides the um, seasides, which has a very high humidity also, but still it has remained rustless. Similarly, I hope you have also heard about this wood steel. Wood steel, this was one of the best steel that was produced by a method which was known in ancient India. And this process for the preparation of wood steel, for this, the porous iron was taken and it was hammered while it was heated. And while it was hot, it was hammered to release the slag. And then it was break it up, and then it was sealed with wooden chips inside a clay container. And and then it was heated. And on heating, what happens is the iron is absorbed the carbon from the wood and it melted. So the steel that was produced in this way, it had a very uniform composition of carbon, that is 1 to 1.6%. And the most important characteristic of this steel was that it can be heated and it can be converted into different bars, and it could be used for preparing other objects, many weapons or Damascus. It was famous, the Damascus swords that was made with these woods steel. Now, and if you just go back and see to it how the iron and steel evolved in the Indian history, you will see that it can be dated back to 1100 BC from when the iron from the megalithic sites such as Hallur has been found, and the when Alexander invaded India at that time, the king Porus has gifted Alexander 30 pounds of Indian iron. And the crucible processes for production of these iron, this has been found in Tamil Nadu. Even the Kautilya in the Arthashastra has also showed the knowledge of minerals, including iron ores, and the art of extracting metals. And there are many such, if you go on to see the gradual evolution of the iron and steel industry. And to this date, you know that how the Bengal Iron Works was established in Kulti in 1870, then 1907 Tata Iron and Steel Company was formed, and the Howrah Bridge in Calcutta, that was built from over 80,000 tons of Tisco's steel. And later on, you will see that we have been able to build upon this expertise that we had about iron and steel. There is also one more very interesting process, that is the downward drift distillation process. And this process is why it is important, because ancient India, this was the first and the only civilization to produce zinc by the distillation process. Now, the problem with zinc is that zinc, as you know, that is extracted from the various ores that are present. But the problem arises because zinc, it has a melting point of around 410 degrees centigrade, and it boils at 930 degrees centigrade. But in the presence of atmospheric air, this zinc, this is converted into zinc oxide at around 550 centigrade. So that means that we have to quickly cool down the zinc vapors to prevent its oxidation. So the ancient Indians, they had made this special process for the distillation of the zinc. And this has been described in a yantra in the 11th century text, Rasa Ratna Samuchaya. And here, the two pots are placed one over the another. The upper pot, this contains the ore, that is a solid charge of which is a source of zinc, and that it is then attached to another pot which is present down. So it is heated from the from the upper vessel, that is heated, and as the zinc melts, and it is then converted here, and it is zinc is collected in this part. So this rapid cooling, you can say, uh, avoids the oxidation of the zinc. So this process, this was one of the important, you can say, methods which was only present in the India for the extraction of the zinc by this downward distillation process. So there are many such smeltering furnaces. These are in the, especially in the Rajasthan, Zawar area is there, where there are many such uh, remains, ancient furnaces or retorts have been found. And uh, one, like for example, these ancient furnaces with 36 retorts, this produce around 30 to 15 kg of zinc per smelt. And for over such 1,30,000 tons of residues, still there are available in the Zawar, which indicates that we had extracted over 1 million tons of zinc using. And this is also one of the metallurgical marvels of the ancient India. Apart from these archaeological sources, then there are also many living practices also. Each area, we know that they have their own folk songs and dances, theaters, dance dramas, and they also carry a rich source of information. Apart from the art forms, they are also, you can say, the living practices, and such practices can be found in almost every area, right? Every corner of the country. There are, for instance, just for example, in Maharashtra, you have this Pauda, that is a Marathi poetry of Velar, or Dashavatara. These are the folk art theaters. Similarly, in the there is also this uh, Kannauj in UP. This area is famous for this mitti katar, that is the scent of the soil. This of scent of when it rains, that specific fragrance that you get. They have been able to prepare the atar, you can say, which with these process. So that is also based on the downward distillation process. So still till now, the process that is used for preparing this mitti ka atar, that still uses this traditional hydrodistillation method, which is native to this particular area. So still now, no modern machineries have been able to replace this ancient method for preparation of this mitti ka atar. That is also known as a deg bhab ka process. Apart from that, also, for example, there are many more dance forms also are there. And it is also important for us. Sometimes we associate these dance forms with one specific religion or community. But in many parts of the country, like for just for an example, in Kerala, there is this dance form that is Uppana, that is basically performed by the Muslim women, right? And if you see this, follow this, you will realize that this Uppana, that is the dance form, this resembles the Kaikoti Kali that is practiced by the women in Kerala, but it has it is a beautiful amalgamation of the dance ritual that was practiced in the Arabian countries at that time. So that is a beautiful amalgamation of the Indian and the Arabic culture, which is expressed in the form of Uppana. Similarly, there is also this Margam Kali, that is a ritual folk dance, which is basically followed by the Syrian Christian community. Then this ancient form of martial arts also, Kalaripaita, which is not only the, you can say, the martial art form, but it also has many steps which are associated with it. For example, before the a person starts with the this practicing this martial art form, there is the Taila Lepanam, that is, that oil is applied before the training starts in the body, before uh, they start the training. So that is also known as the origin for many other ancient tradition, many other martial art forms. Then there are also these testimonials also, like or secondary sources. For instance, the Chinese traveler who traveled to India at that particular time, he learned Sanskrit and he studied many of the ancient texts, and he observed that India is the celestial storehouse of knowledge. Similarly, Al-Andalusi, who in his categories of nation, which can be dated back to 11th century, he said that India was the first country to have mastered you can say, have cultivated the science. And they also, with these texts also, you will find many references, like, for example, Sir Joseph Banks, who was the president of the British Royal Society. He said that I have a liberal supply of wood steel, but the steel which is of the Indian origin, that is the best steel, right? Because with that, you can make fine cutlery. You can also make your fine edge instruments for the surgical processes. So there are over like manuscripts also, as I said, no doubt there are more manuscripts in the Sanskrit, Prakrit or Apramhamsha, but literature, you see that they are also available in even in the other languages, whether it is Tamil, Gujarati, Persian, Kannada, Malayalam, Urdu, Telugu, Marathi, Bengali, Punjabi, even in Sinhalese and Tibetan also, there are many manuscripts which are a very wealth of information. So with this, I would like to end. And as you know, this Ministry of Education that has also established an Indian IKS division, which supports not only for the different activities or conferences and all, but it also supports for the research projects also. Every year around January, February. Now this year it just has been closed. So they are also providing funding for the research projects which are related to the IKS. So we should just appreciate the fact that IKS, it is not a subject, but it is a label that is given to a vast repository of knowledge. And this repository is distributed over different domains in different languages, and why it is important? Because the knowledge that has been generated before us, that will ultimately help us to see far ahead. As you see, like it would be just like standing on the shoulder of the giants. And that is how, and that is why we see that the national education policy envisions an education system which is rooted in the Indian ethos. So with that, I would like to end, and why it is important for us to include in the curriculum. As Baba Dayum has observed that in the end, we will conserve only what we love, we will love only what we understand, and we will understand what we are taught. So with these words, I would thank you. And if there are any questions or queries, we can quickly take those questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Participants, if you have any queries or the question, you can directly ask to Professor Suresh, ma'am. Please, anyone. It will be really appreciable if you have any queries or the questions with regards to particular this session. Please, anyone. Ma'am, one specific question has come to the YouTube chat. Can I take, ma'am, if you could permit?
Yes, please.
While we are implementing this syllabus in our university or the state government of Maharashtra, has restricted this IKS into particularly for the undergraduate for 2 credit generic course, and now the university or the policy maker are expected to make the some domain specific courses. So what will be your view, ma'am, for which domain specific we should go, so that the student can attract for this IK towards this IKS?
Yes, like what, because as I said earlier, also like IKS is not confined to one domain. And initially, certainly to give an overview, these 2 credit courses might have been designed. But if you go and see, like for in each and every subject, for example, if you are designing a curriculum for chemistry, we can include the metallurgical practices, like which can be included as a part of one unit can be included in that particular subject. For instance, if it is dealing with the, say, botany or some other biological sciences, we can include the parts where we are including the medicinal practices of the ancient or the tribal communities, right? So it is up to us to identify, like in our discipline, what are the areas or which are uh, present in the our ancient or in the traditional uh, communities, uh, or tribal communities, and that can be included as a part in our curriculum.
Thank you, madam. Yes, participants having any queries or the question? If you have, there are no more queries, then we can conclude and for go for the next session. I think, ma'am, there are no more queries. So if you could permit, shall we conclude, ma'am?
Yeah, sure, we can.
So on behalf of Malvi Mission Teacher Training Center, Sant Gadge Baba, Amravati University, uh, Ramrao Adig Institute of Technology, D.Y. Patil University, deemed to be University, Nerul, Navi Mumbai, and all the learned participants, I extend my sincere thanks to Professor Suresh ma'am for such a wonderful session towards this integration of IKS in our curricula. Definitely, ma'am, rather than dialogue, this session is gone monologue due to the participants, but your inputs are and insights throughout this session are very useful for us. And that will be beneficial in our upcoming research as well as the teaching learning purpose. We have once again extend our sincere thanks for your precious time and thought-provoking session here. And with the kind consent of Professor Suresh ma'am, I would like to declare that this particular session will be over here. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. And thank you, participants. We will go for the next session. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, Professor Nazir, sir.
Yes, good afternoon, sir.
Sir, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Shall we start, sir, if you could permit?
Yes.
Yeah. So, friends, good afternoon once again. As I have already told you that the today's session have been split into the 2 different parts, and both are interconnected with each other. Uh, in the first session, we have talked about the
Why is it?
IKS based research. In the first session, we have talked about the IKS based research, and now we are elaborating that part research and development, what what are going in our country, and what universe has demand towards this research and development, what is our position and what we have to do, and which kind of societal impactful research will be there, so that that should be inculcated in our practices. So we'll going to discuss this very much important aspects with one of the senior scholar, a senior and eminent scholar, Professor Nazir Ahmed Nazir, sir. First of all, I extend my warm welcome to you to this flagship program and particular to this session.
Thank you, sir. Thank
Friends,
you very much.
Professor Nazir sir is a senior professor of the commerce at the University of Kashmir, Srinagar, with with more than 3 decades of distinguished experience in the teaching, research, academic administration. He holds a PhD degree from the University of Delhi. Uh, since his initial since his starting of career, He has served for the University of Kashmir in the various capacities that includes the head of the department, and currently also serving as the director for the Malvi Mission Teacher Training Center, as well as the director for the Center of Career Planning and the Counseling. Professor Nazir sir has extensive international academic exposure, having served as a professor at Jahan University, Saudi Arabia, and the faculty and the head of the Department of the Business and Economics at the Mozhan College, Sultanate Oman. His research career spanned over 3 decades, including a completion of UGC-sponsored major research project on the training effectiveness in the government schools. He has guided multiple PhD as well as the MPhil and the postdoctoral scholars. As the prolific scholar, Professor Nazir has scholarly scholarly books, contributed chapters and study materials, and published numerous research papers in the reputed national and the international journal and other scholarly outlets. He has actively participated and presented the paper at international conferences across the India, Malaysia, Australia, Hong Kong, Indonesia, and has organized major national as well as the international conferences and the workshop at the University of Kashmir. Beyond the teaching and the research, Professor Nazir sir has held several important academic governance roles, such as the member of Academic Council, chairman of the Board of Studies, chairman for the departmental level research committee, member for the Board of Research Studies uh, at the University of Kashmir. He is also serve on the visiting faculty of the reputed institutions that includes the AMU, that is the Aligarh Muslim University, Islamic University of Science and Technology, Kashmir. His career reflects a sustainable commitment towards the academic excellence, capacity building, and the advancement of management education and the research. So, friends, this is the brief introduction with regards to our today's scholarly expert, Professor Nazir sir. Sir, I once again extend my warm welcome to you, and sir will exchange his couple of thoughts on the research and development that will be happen in the present era. So, sir, I once again extend my sincere warm welcome to you and request you to please start with your session. Sir, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Atiq Sahab. And good afternoon to all the participants of this NEP program. And I'm here to deliberate upon a very important theme that is one of the themes of the NEP programs. We have 8 to 10 themes. And the idea is that the scholars and especially the faculty should get proper understanding of the implementation regard to the implementation of the NEP program, NEP as such. So in that context, several themes have been identified already, and we have chosen one theme, that is research and development, on which we shall be discussing. And again, in research and development, we can have a number of themes, but the one that we have chosen for the session today is related to the formulation of hypothesis when it comes to our own research, our own dissertations, or for that matter, our own articles that we publish in our reputed journals. So in a bid to have our, I can say, scientific and a very appropriate look of the research that we conduct, we need to have a proper understanding of the research hypothesis as well. Since I'm in the profession for a pretty long time now, in different capacities, I've been able to gauge and have been able to understand that how research scholars in particular, and then also their guidance naturally, have a bit of, a requirement for proper understanding of the hypothesis formulation. That's what we shall be more, debating upon and more focusing upon. One that I see that when it comes to the coherence that should be there amongst the various components of research that we conduct, that is by and large missing in the research thesis. For example, the constructs are different, the objects are different, the hypotheses are different, then naturally the kinds of tools and techniques you would employ and the results that you get out of those tools and techniques or the data that you collect will also not be, in any way kind of worthwhile. We have to be very serious and very clear about it, that when it comes to the, the research, when it comes to the conducting of research on scientific lines, we try to maintain that sequence, we try to maintain that coherence amongst the various components of the research. And so it's in that context, one of the important components is the hypothesis formulation. And we should keep this in mind that our hypothesis should in any case be in alignment with the objective that we have drawn for our study purposes. And likewise, our objective should be connected to the constructs that we have, for example, identified for our research purposes. And that then only it will make a kind of a sense and it will be of some value. Therefore, we shall start with it. And I would also love that this particular session does not remain a kind of a monologue, but rather it will be an interactive one. And you will have some queries in between. You can raise them also. Or else, if I have got something to seek from, you'll be ready to respond rather than, run away. That's very important for us in order to make it more interactive and lively. And that's how we can get kind of, more interesting information. We can share more interesting information on this online platform on a very important topic that's connected to the formulation of hypothesis. So before I move further and move on, as I say that we shall have this as an interactive one, I have one or two things to ask you, beginning with that, what do you mean and what do you think of hypothesis? Yes, am I audible to you?
Yes, sir, you're audible, perfectly audible.
Yeah, if I'm perfectly audible to you, is my question then perfectly audible to you all, please? I am only concerned with knowing from you that what do you mean by hypothesis? How would you define hypothesis?
Hypothesis can be something which can be proved or which can be said whether it is right or wrong, reaching towards some scientific investigation based on some observations and the past knowledge we have or the knowledge we have gathered across from different research papers or something like that. Something like we identify a kind of a research gap and then we are trying to prove it.
Okay, okay. Anybody else would like to just share his or her thoughts on what is hypothesis? What do you mean by hypothesis?
It might be an assumption based on certain evidences or observation.
Very good. Assumptions that we have about some phenomena, and that is based on some very good. So we say that straight away you can answer to two important questions. One is, what is hypothesis? You may call them as tentative statements, assumptions, and they are based on some. Naturally, when you make assumptions, they cannot be made just, they have to be based on some evidences. So we say that normally the evidences that we have are a review of literature that we go through. The review of literature becomes the basis for, if we hypothesize for something about some phenomena, say we talk about relationship between the variables, that must be a reason. There must be a reason behind that relationship, and that is the literature that suggests us the reason. So we have got the literature available. That becomes the basis for the hypothesis formulation. Absolutely right. And then we can say that subsequent to this, that when we have the evidences with regard to a particular phenomena or the constructs that we have chosen for study purposes, the next point could be that, is it a must that we should necessarily start our hypothesis with null, or we can have an alternate hypothesis as well? Do we require to necessarily have the null hypothesis, or we can have the what is called alternate hypothesis as well? Any idea about it? I'm asking that, shall we begin with the null hypothesis or an alternate hypothesis? Any response from your end, please?
Null hypothesis, sir.
Okay, someone says null hypothesis. Any more responses, please? Shall we necessarily start with the null hypothesis? Hypothesis, some guess that we want to scientifically prove to be true or false. We require both. Okay, somebody has written that we require both. Okay, let me tell you one thing that when you talk about hypothesis formulation, and if you say that hypothesis is based on some evidence, and if we are basing our hypothesis on some evidence, and if the evidence suggests for an alternate hypothesis, not a null hypothesis, shall we still start with a null hypothesis? Is my question. So the point basically is that we shall be very clear on this important issue that if we are basing your hypothesis on some rationale, on some evidence, it could be in the shape of an empirical research or any theoretical development, theories developed by some philosophers, some researchers, some authors. So in that case, we do not require to necessarily begin with the null hypothesis if the evidences suggest contrary to null hypothesis. Number one. Number two, most important is that do we require to have the hypothesis for all different types of research, or are there some specific research for which we require to have the hypothesis? That too is very important. Again, my point is that do we require a hypothesis for all different types of research?
Not essentially, sir.
Yeah, there are some research which we call them as exploratory research, where we are exploring. There is no evidence available to us, since we are formulating hypotheses based on the evidence. Now, since there is no evidence, you are trying to explore the relationships. So in that case, there might not be any evidence available to us. We may have to start from the scratch. And in that case, we might start with research questions rather than research hypothesis. That's why we say that we don't require to have hypothesis for all different types of research. Research which are exploratory in nature would necessarily require research questions. And when it comes to hypothesis, basically, the important thing that we have to bear in mind is that it provides us with a kind of a direction. And it also provides us with a kind of a demarcation as well, that we cannot be beyond that, which is not the case in exploratory kind of a research. In an exploratory research, you don't have any boundaries. You've got simple research questions, and the process of exploring the phenomenon, the relationships, or what you want to explore, you are on an expedition, and whatever comes in the way, you go on exploring that. Well, when it comes to an empirical kind of a research, or when it comes to the hypothesis-based research, the demarcation is already defined there, it is given there, and you cannot cross that demarcation. So therefore, though it is a limitation with empirical research, but it does set a kind of a tone for a researcher that these are the boundaries and you should not go beyond these boundaries. One of the limitations also for the hypothesis, but then also a researcher cannot take up everything for study purposes. There has to be some delimitation. So in that context, having a hypothesis surely an advantage, a boon for a research scholar. He ought to have it. For a researcher, not necessarily we can say a research scholar, we can say that for a researcher, it's good to have the hypothesis. And especially if you are doing a empirical kind of a research. Now, apart from this, an important thing is that when it comes to the empirical research that we do, the thing is that how can we identify and how can we say that this particular research hypothesis is a scientific one, a good one? Is there any criteria that can suggest, or are there any criterions that would suggest that a hypothesis developed by me or somebody is a scientific one, is a good one? Do you think that there are some criterions, and what are those criterions if you have in mind, please? I'm not asking the question, rather I'm just trying to clarify the things so that we have got an interactive session rather than have it a boring, a monologue kind of a research. And then also I believe that we have plenty of participants who are already PhDs, are the ones who are pursuing PhD, and maybe even in the advanced stage they might be. So naturally, they might have an understanding of it already. some of the things. That's what we shall be discussing about. So, what do you think are some of the specific criterions that we require to fulfill in order to make our hypothesis a scientific and a good one?
So it has to be testable. Then it should solve some research gap,
Very good. You
and
say
it
that
has
it should be
to have,
testable.
yeah, it has to have like when we formulate a hypothesis, we have some variables also. So we need
Yeah,
to
of course.
establish a relationship between that, and that should be possible.
So we see we have to have them as measurable, testable. We will
Yeah,
have the, yeah, of course, we have some variables as well.
and
Then we
most
see
importantly, it should solve a real world problem. Should relate to a real world issue.
that is basically subject to your constructs. What kind of
Okay.
constructs we have chosen for study purposes. That's true. That's very important. But in case we really want that it should solve the real, I can say, problem, situation, that is why we have to be very careful about, in fact, that it's not, the research is not now confined to the universities alone. It is extended to the colleges wherein research has to be conducted, because especially in view of NEP and in view of the various, we can say, transformations that have been initiated while implementing the NEP. Of course, that research is not a domain of the universities alone, it is that of the college as well. And more importantly, the context has to be kept in mind. The socially relevant research problems have to be undertaken. You're absolutely right. And then it should be in a manner that the research solves the real life problems and issues, for example, that our society confronts at a societal level, at a regional level, at a national level. That is pretty important. That's pretty essential. But then, as we say, that all depends upon the kind of constructs that you have delineated and you have identified for your research purpose. More important is that when it comes to, as Dr. Neelima Dongre is talking about, it has to be testable, and it should be measurable, and there are several such things which are very important, very essential. So naturally, just a minute, please. I have got some important message to. The point basically is, extremely sorry. There is some message that has been sent to me by some important agency, and I'll have to just respond to it. Okay. Anyways, so I was talking about that there are some important criterions that ought to be fulfilled in order to say that whether the hypothesis formulated is a scientific or is a good one. As you said about testability of the, then likewise measurability, we say that it should be very, one can say it should be very, what is called, should be very specific. It should be very specific also, because you know that as my own observations, because being dean of the school as well, having an opportunity to go through theses of my scholars when I conducted viva as a chairman of the board of viva voce, and apart from that, the thesis that I received from outside and from within my own state or UT, and I do see that there is definitely a lot of lapse deficiency in the formulation of hypothesis. And one of the lapses that I have been very vividly, I can say, observing is the hypothesis being like statements, 3, 4, 5 sentences is a huge, issue with that, which is something you have to be very careful about when it comes to the formulation of, hypothesis. Specificity, I can say clarity, there shall not be any kind of an ambiguity. Likewise, we say that falsifiability of the what is called the research hypothesis, that we have to be careful about one important aspect, and that is the hypothesis. If you are formulating a hypothesis, you should not get glued to this hypothesis in a sense that you have to necessarily prove it right or necessarily prove it wrong. That should never be the case. We have to always keep in mind that we are a third party to the research. That means what data reveals, we have to make presentation of that. We have to present that instead of feeling that what hypothesis I have formulated has to be necessarily proved or it has to be necessary as the case may be. So the point is therefore, as a third party, as a researcher, never be confused with the point that the hypothesis that we have formulated has to be necessarily proved right. It may not prove, it may not get accepted. That's the reason when it comes to the hypothesis formulation, we have to always keep in mind that when a review of literature, and three important points we do require to have the review of literature. One is that when we are introducing the constructs, that is the introduction part of our research, for example, thesis, or in fact, for that matter, a paper that you are writing. Subsequent to that, when you are doing a review of literature, ROL, so once you do a review of literature, then also you have to make an extensive research review in order to find out the research gaps and then to come up with the hypothesis formulation. And subsequent to this is that when you are applying the relevant tools and techniques to the data that you've collected, especially if it is the, empirical kind of a research. So in that case, you have to be careful about that. Just a minute, please. Okay. So we have to keep in mind that when you are justifying the results, those have to be justified, or those have to be corroborated and substantiated by the existing literature. So therein also you require to have the, we will have to we have to refer back to the literature that's available on the constructs and on the results that you have basically identified, and you have, in fact, just a minute, please. I have to attend this call necessarily. Yes, please. Call me after some time, please. Call me after 5. Okay. So we say that therein also. Now, what happens with the researcher normally is that the hypothesis that the researcher has formulated, and if he does not find a substantive research available on the results that you have come up with, a researcher normally tries to maneuver with the hypothesis. He just tries to save it because he doesn't have a convincing argument as to the results that he has come up with. Here lies the beauty of a researcher, that he does not fall prey to whether the existing literature is supporting my research or not. If you are a true researcher, a scientific one, whatever results have come to you, you have to present those, but with convincing arguments. With convincing arguments. And that is the beauty of a researcher. But in many cases, what a researcher does, and he finds it the easy way out, that in case he doesn't have the existing literature supporting his findings, he tries to basically maneuver with the hypothesis, change the hypothesis, change the results, or change the results, and then in that case, just justify it with existing literature. There is something that a researcher has to abstain from, because that is not a real quality of research. That is not something that you would be able to basically help, address the research issues and problems and the societal issues that you have taken up for research purposes, especially. So that's something which we have to be careful about, and we have to be very sincere and very, I can say, ethical in that regard. Having said this, we have to have the simplicity and other things which are very essential for us. We have to be careful about all these important aspects of our research, including our hypothesis being simple, falsifiable, measurable, and so on and so forth. And now, before we move on to discussing how to formulate a hypothesis, I would basically like to throw light on the research philosophy. Have you heard about research philosophy? You know that when it comes to designing a research, everyone designs a research. Some of you might go for an experimental kind of a study. Some of you might go for a case study. Some of you might go for an empirical kind of a study, collection of data, etc., etc. But without knowing that, why have you chosen a particular path? Research design may be specific to your research constructs that you've identified for your research, and you come up with a research design. But important is that if you are asked as to why this particular research design was followed by you, as a researcher, you should have a ready-made answer to it, that I have done it, I have come up with this research design because of these reasons. Reasons should be absolutely clear. Now, who will basically guide you for those reasons, or who will guide you for research design? You have always to have the research philosophy in mind. Research philosophy basically and initially it does, or primarily we can say, comprise of these three important components, especially ontology and epistemology. These are the most vital components of research philosophy, and that will guide us, and that do guide in fact us, as to why have we followed a particular research design. Have you heard about it? Ontology, epistemology, and axiology, please. By knowing that, I would accordingly elaborate it. If I know that you already, a majority of you already know it, then I might just, I can say, give a passing reference to it. If I know that a majority of you don't have gone through it, or they don't have much of an understanding of this, then I will be a little more elaborative. That is why I'm asking. A few of you could just tell me that, do you know anything about this ontology? Anyways, there's no response. That means that you might have skipped it. And we shall have to be a little elaborate on discussing and defining what ontology and epistemology and axiology means. Am I right? It's very difficult in an online session to keep the participants alive. They are alive. My point basically is alive to the session. I would love that if you are there and you respond to what I am asking. Are you hearing me? Are you hearing me, please? I think that we have lost the connection. Is it like that? No, that doesn't seem to me, but I think there is a problem because we don't have the people talking about. Are you hearing me?
Yes, sir.
Very few. Anyways, I could receive ultimately a response. The point is basically I was talking about ontology, epistemology, and axiology. When it comes to this is the basis for our research design, very much required for our research design. What is ontology? Ontology is basically the study of reality. What exists? It talks about the nature of reality. So, for example, you are choosing a particular phenomenon, a particular construct, for instance, to simplify it. It means that what is this? What is the nature of that particular construct? What is the nature of that reality? The construct that you've chosen for study purposes. That is what ontology basically describes. And it does tell us, for example, what is the nature of reality and what exists. And there is a reality which is but independent of our thoughts or beliefs. This is very important. It's very crucial. If you have to basically choose a particular research design, you have to be doubly sure that what is the nature of that construct or reality. Reason that it is not subject to your interpretation, the way you deem it, the way you think about it. It's in existence. For example, gravity exists whether or not we believe in it. There can't be any tampering with. You can't construct your own belief onto it. You can't interpret it the way you want to interpret it. That's why we say that whatever you believe is art, the reality is reality. The nature of reality is such that it cannot be subject to anybody's interpretation the way you would like it to be interpreted. That's not going to be the case. Therefore, we say, now there are several examples that could be suggested here. For example, do organizations really have a culture, or is it just something that we imagine? Understanding this ontology will help us how to study reality, which is important. So how do we feel about a reality, the nature of reality, that will let us know what kind of a method we should choose in order to study that reality? How can we study that reality? Now, for example, in this particular ontology, we have three important perspectives that we keep in mind. One perspective is that there is a single truth, singularity of reality, singularity. No other interpretation is possible. Objectivism, only one reality is there. For example, leadership exists. It exists. It's not imaginary. Culture exists. It's not imaginary. It's not imaginary. It exists. What is the nature of reality? The nature of reality is that if we talk about a culture, we say, yes, culture exists. Or the other way around would be, as a researcher, we believe that culture is imaginary. If suppose a single truth about it is that culture is not reality, it is imagination. It is an imagination. Then you will accordingly proceed on. How? That we will discuss a little later. Likewise, we have multiple realities or truths. Phenomena is maybe single, but we say that the way it is being understood, the way it is being taken, that is multiple. We say there are multiple realities. There is not a one single reality. We don't have a one single reality. We have multiple realities. Like, for example, a film is watched by a few people or hundreds of people. If you just go and ask them, how about the film? How was this film all about? There could be a reason, maybe there could be different kinds of interpretations by them, because watching a film, maybe it is subject to multiple realities. Somebody would say that it was very inspiring, the other one would say no, it was not, or others would say it was not inspiring, it was a very boring one. But both people have got perspectives and they got the right perspective, the way they feel about it. You cannot question them, because the nature of reality is likewise. It's not a single reality. You see that you have a film being watched by a few people, some, believing about it to be inspiring, others believing it to be very boring. Likewise, a workplace culture, for instance, or a workplace, in a workplace, we have what HR policies. Some would say that a policy, if it is taken from the management's perspective, they would say, oh, we have come up with a policy which is very motivational, which is very interesting, which is helpful. While others, for example, the employee's perspective would be, there's a kind of an extra pressure on us. Both are valid realities. Now, how you feel about it, that matters as a researcher. The reality that exists is multiple reality, and it is socially constructed. You have a scope for interpreting it the way you want to interpret it. And then you have many or one or many realities. So the point here is, for example, I give an example to you. In an academic institution we belong to, all of we belong to, we take up the case of a leadership style, for instance, how it is. One would mean that leadership style is universal. like bureaucratic leadership style. It will, or a transformational leadership style for that matter, it will fit all different kinds of education institutions. That means one reality would mean leadership is universal. It is universal. Many realities would mean leadership style is subject to the context. It is subject to the context. What matters is that what kind of an education institution it is. For example, if it's a private one, we might say that it will be more innovative, more competitive kind of a culture existing there, or a leadership style existing there. In comparison to it, if it is a public university, a government university, we might say that the bureaucratic kind of a leadership style exists there, not a transformational one. Why? Because the leadership is not considered as a one reality. We say that leadership depends upon the context in which we are talking about the style. So if it is a public university, we might have a very bureaucratic kind of a leadership style in existence. And when it comes to a private one, we might have a very transformational, a very innovative kind of a leadership style in existence. So leadership is not universal. It would vary from context to context. That's why we say that there is a one or there could be many realities. Likewise, if, for example, we take a university, now again, we may say culture, organizational culture. We may say one reality would mean that we have a same organizational culture or a work culture existing all in all departments of a university, for example, or a college. That is one reality. The other way around is that we might have many realities. Culture is in existence, it's a reality, but different departments will have different cultures, different work cultures or organizational cultures. They will have different. Some departments will be very innovative, they will be more collaborative, they will have very competitive kind of a culture in existence, while some would be very traditionally running. They will be still going with the age-old practices. They might not have some very innovative kind of programs that they have conceived. So we say that in a university or an academic institution, or if we believe in one reality, we might say that universal or culture is in existence and it is same all over. The other way around would be no, culture would vary from department to department. Likewise, one reality, we have various public institutions. If we say that all public institutions will have similar kind of organizational culture, that would mean one reality in existence. Many realities would mean that different public institutions will have different, we can say, cultures. Why? Because leaders have a very different ways and tactics of running the affairs of the institutions. So it depends upon that. So therefore, when it comes, now, why is it necessary to know about it? Because the research philosophy, it guides us actually in what is called in deciding about our own research design. So when it comes to ontology, single truth, multiple realities, or one or many realities, it helps us which kind of a, I can say, approach we should adopt in conducting our research. That will mean what kind of a research design we should be holding to. Now, not only do we require to know about the ontology, we require to know about the epistemology as well. Epistemology is now we know that we have three important perspectives on ontology: single truth, multiple realities or multiple truths, or one or many realities or one or many truths. That is the existence of reality. Ontology only speaks about the existence of reality, what is in existence. Then comes the epistemology. Now, since if we only know about the existence of reality without acquiring that, without knowing about the nature of reality, it would mean that we have done a half work, and that will be of no use. You cannot only try to identify the existence of reality and say that there are one or many realities or blah, blah, blah. That's what I discussed about. But more important is that now, how to reach to this reality, how to acquire this reality, what method should we employ in order to reach to this reality. We have for that epistemology. So we say that epistemology is basically a branch of philosophy that deals with the knowledge, how we acquire it, what counts as valid knowledge, and how we can be sure about the knowledge. That's very important. How do we come to know about it? Now, in this case, again, we have three important perspectives to keep in mind. One is measurability of knowledge, the other one is interpretation of knowledge, and the third one is measurability and interpretation of knowledge. Very vital for us to know that why shall we have these minimum the beliefs or concepts about the epistemology? No. Now look at the first one, measurability of knowledge. Now, existence of knowledge is what the ontology talks about. Measurability is now this reality which is in existence, the knowledge that is in existence can only be measured. It can be measured on. For example, I'll give an example of a leadership style in an academic institution. We say that our belief is that leadership style is measurable. There is an existence of it. It's not imagination. It's in existence. It's in existence. Leadership style exists. There are different styles being used by leaders. Leadership style is in existence. Now, how to reach to that? How to know about it? How to get to it? We have a concept of measurability of knowledge. That means this nature of knowledge that is in existence, which we term as ontology, for example, leadership style, it is in existence and it can only be acquired through measurability. That means a researcher will come up with a questionnaire and he will drop in the office or in an academic institution. He will go to different, depending upon the sample that he chooses, he will go to different kinds of faculty members, and or maybe if he has chosen non-teaching as well, he may go to them in order to discern and know about the existence of leadership style in a given academic institution, or for that matter, organizational culture, for that matter. Why? Because the belief is that there is only one reality, that is culture exists or leadership exists. And then epistemology indicates that we can measure it also. So we can take a questionnaire, we can go to the chosen sample respondents and hand over the questionnaires to them, get them filled up, get back, and then employ different tools and techniques in order to know about what kind of a leadership style is in existence, which one is predominant one and which one is not. Because there are different types of culture, there are different types of leadership styles, and so forth. Just confined to that. Second and important thing is that knowledge, again, there are multiple realities, or there could be anything, or the same reality. Reality, it is imaginary. It's not easy that you can, for example, measure it. The other way around, in order to choose your, I can say, design would be, that is what we call as interpretation of knowledge. You can only interpret it. You can observe. You can interpret it. So it means that, for example, what kind of a relationship exists between a faculty, a supervisor, and a scholar? Or again, if we go back to the same previous example of leadership style or a culture, what kind of culture is in existence in a department or running university? What a researcher would do if he feels that culture is imaginary. It is not something that can be measured. He will come, he will sit, he will go on observing the students, the faculty members, their meetings. He would sit, he would just see, for example, how things are, we can say, how things shape up, for example, in a department or in the academic institution. So the point here is that his belief is that leadership can only be interpreted. It can only be observed, and it can be jotted down, and it can be accordingly presented. There is no scope for measuring the culture or a leadership style in a given organization. That's what we normally call as a qualitative kind of research. So if we are feeling that the phenomena that is in existence, the reality that is in existence can only be interpreted, we might resort to what is called a qualitative kind of a research, not the quantitative one, which is only possible in case of measurability of knowledge. Now look at it. When you have decided about it, if you have to decide about the research design, you have to necessarily know about the reality, the nature of reality, the existence of reality, and how that reality can be, accessed to. And the third and most important, this is what basically is being very much talked about nowadays and which being much relied upon as the most authentic ways of or authentic way of conducting research, which is what we call as the knowledge is measurable and interpretation of knowledge is also possible. So we say that the first and the second concept was simply measurability and interpretation. The third one is basically both. Therefore, we require a mixed method. And nowadays, this is the kind of research that is being appreciated and encouraged because by resorting to measurability and interpretation of knowledge kind of a concept, we are in a better position to actually know about and acquire the knowledge. Not only through one method only, for example, same leadership style. Now, there are lots of deficiencies in conducting a research on several of the concepts, which is simply based on the collection of data, filling up of a questionnaire. And again, there are again deficiencies if we conduct a very qualitative kind of research, we'll just observe things, we might skip many things. So researchers do encourage and do, I can say, argue for a measurability and interpretation of knowledge concept, which means that we might have to resort to what is called a mixed method of research. Am I audible to you, please?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay. So the thing is, therefore, we might do a mixed method kind of a research in case we find that the reality of knowledge or the is possible only through measurability and through interpretation alone. Then we might go beyond this and then we may look at axiology, though it's not one of the important, but some suggest that it being one of the forms of research philosophy. Otherwise, the most important components that we talked about are the ontology and epistemology. Axiology is also viewed as one of the important branches of philosophy, and it is concerned with the values that you have to always maintain, ethical standards that you have to maintain, moral standards you have to maintain always while conducting research. That indicates many things. That talks about, for example, how have you approached the, for example, how have you chosen the sample, if you are doing a quantitative or a qualitative or that for that matter mixed method kind of a research, how you chosen it, how you approached them, what kind of a question have you used, how much authentic that question is, and how much impartial you are in conducting research, and likewise, more importantly, in fact, how much ethical you are in the sense that the data that you collect, exactly the data that you really collected from the sample respondents, there is no maneuvering involved in it. You know that on very recently we heard about that lots of articles were, I can say, retrieved from the, and they were just kind of abundant for want of the ethical and moral considerations, because the researchers who had conducted those research, they had not followed any ethical practices in conducting research. So who would wish like that? So naturally, ethical dimension of research is picking up, very seriously. And since there are also some given softwares that also tell us something about that, whether the data has been manipulated, it has been maneuvered, or it is a fake one, or it is a original one. So we have to do a lot in that context. We have not, in fact, and then more important, not in terms of only the we have to do it because it talks about the I can say the issues with the research that we conduct, but more importantly that when we conduct research, we spend a lot of money. If suppose you are a JRF scholar, or there is a scholar who is under you as a JRF, how much of money does he take from the government? That's taxpayers' money. And when it is the data is fudged, the data is tampered with, that means that whatever the social issue or a problem that you've raised for addressing it cannot be addressed properly. There will be lots of, I can say, lacuna in that research if it is just tampered with kind of a data, a fake data on which you have come up with your own, I can say, explanations, and you have come up with your own findings. that surely will not be of a great use. So it's always essentially important that we maintain the standard, we maintain the moral and ethical standards while pursuing our research and collecting the data. So, and now look at it, as I said already, that with us, we have got quantitative, qualitative, and mixed method that is possible. The first one talks about positivism, where we say that we are just concerned with a kind of a single, I can say, reality, and then we believe that it is measurable. It's measurable. One way, and the only way to reach to that knowledge is measurability or measuring the knowledge, and we call as positivism. Constructivism is subject to our interpretation. The knowledge that is in existence can only be interpreted. And the last one is pragmatism, which means a more authentic way of conducting research, where we mix up the interpretation as well as measurability of the knowledge. We interpret as well as measure the knowledge. We call it as pragmatic kind of research. Now have a look on this, a very important, I can say, onion, and this is given by Saunders, Lewis, and Thornwell. How many of you are, already aware of this Saunders research onion? How many of you are already aware of it, please? Yes, how many of you are already aware of this? Can you just tell me anything about it? Have we have any information about the research onion? I can look at it. This, as we have the onions having different layers, so is the case with this research onion. And the ultimate and the innermost layer of this onion is the data collection and data analysis. And when it comes to the outer layers, we begin with the research philosophy. The most important thing is that you reach at the end, you reach to this data collection. More important is that you are here, for example, and you are, the first thing is the research philosophy, positivism, realism, interpretivism, and pragmatism, and then it guides you for an approach that you have to adopt. Though we have mentioned here only two, but we have got three actually approaches. One is called a deductive kind of an approach, the other one is called inductive, and the third one is considered as an abductive kind of approach. Abductive. In a deductive, in fact, this is the kind of a approach where we require hypothesis formulation. While for the inductive kind of research, we don't require, because it's an exploratory one. And abductive requires both the measurability of the knowledge as well as interpretation of knowledge. That's why you call it abductive approach. And then after this, we have got to devise the strategy. So we have philosophy, we have the approach, and then we have also the strategies. And these strategies would differ. It could be experiment, survey, case, action, so on and so forth. Then we move on to the choices. We can have either mono method, we can have mixed method, or we can have multi-method in conducting our research. And then this gives birth to what is called time horizons. Time horizons could be either cross-sectional or it could be longitudinal. And when it comes to cross-sectional, it basically means that you collect data at one point in time. And when it comes to longitudinal, you know that at most, nowadays especially, it's a longitudinal kind of research that's being more promoted and more encouraged, where at different intervals, at least 2 times, you, meet the your subjects, your sample respondents, if you have to conduct a kind of a longitudinal kind of a study. Time horizon matters. What kind of a study you are conducting, and how you are, for example, if it's a mixed method kind of a research, where there is both measurability and repression of the knowledge possible. There you may not just stick to cross-sectional, you might have to necessarily move on to the longitudinal kind of a research study. Time horizon matters there. And then this gives ultimately birth to the innermost layer, which is present here, which is data collection and data analysis. How to, I can say, collect data and how to analyze data, techniques and procedures. This is what Saunders, Lewis, and Thornhill talk about the research onion. Now, before we move on to discussing the now look here, that's what I was talking about. Deductive research always needs, I can say hypothesis, while as inductive does not. In a deductive kind of a research, we require existing theory, or you may have the empirical studies available. You formulate a hypothesis, collect data, analyze data, accept or reject the hypothesis. But in case of inductive kind of a reasoning, you have got specific observations, you are exploring the things, and then also there is a pattern recognition, and you draw very general kind of a conclusion. I give an example to you. For example, if you are, for example, taking a lunch outside, and you find that the kind of the spices involved in the preparation of the I can say the vegetables, for example, if you take a veg, the vegetables you take, and then you find that your stomach has upset, for example. And it happened once you have taken the the food outside, and you found that my stomach's got upset, and you don't draw any kind of a conclusion as on that date, because probably it's the first experience, and you are not that used to the spicy food, but you took it, and so you just forgot about that, whether it was because of that or any other reason was there responsible for it. I'm talking about before you make any kind of a general conclusion, because you are exploring, you are connecting the threads and data, you are connecting it. So what you do is that next time, again, if you take a food outside and it's a very spicy one, again, if your stomach upsets, you feel something is there is some connection. So you just start drawing conclusions. This is how you do it in a kind of an inductive kind of a reasoning or a research. You don't reach to a conclusion right at the very first place. It takes you time. It takes you time. So in an exploratory kind of a research, a different approach is probably, used by a researcher in order to reach to a general conclusion. Now, before I move on to, since we would like to have some exercises on the hypothesis formulation, so naturally we would require to know the components of hypothesis, and then we'll move on to that some scenarios so that we have some clarity of how we can formulate a hypothesis. We begin with a hypothesis, always have to have a sample that you know also. You cannot have any hypothesis formulation without the sample or the population you are interested in studying. Then important is the variable, the variables that you've chosen for study purposes. You have to have necessarily minimum of 2 variables. Now we know that as far as research is concerned, or research scholars are concerned, they can afford to have more than 4 or 5 variables for a study purpose, simply because of the facilities that they are available to them. There are lots of facilities available, especially if they are JRFs. There were plenty of, we can say, funds available, funds at their disposal. And apart from that, the material that they can, study material, then softwares when it comes to data collection, data, we can say, interpretation or analysis. So we have plenty of softwares available which can be used, and they are also free of charges at places. So naturally, we should always try to encourage today's scholars to move on from 2 to 3 variables for study purposes to 5, 6 variables at a time, because of the facilities that are available. So easily it can be done by a scholar nowadays. And also the data, also the what we call as the study material is available. So don't restrict your scholars for study of 2 or 3 variables for the study purposes. Encourage them to have more than, we can say, 3, 4, 5 variables at a time. One is the facilities that I say that we all acknowledge. The second thing is that this will help them to publish their articles in some reputed journals, because if they have already got the data for 5, 6 variables, it won't be that difficult for them, number one, to come up with a very comprehensive kind of a research, and plus they can make very good interpretations of that if they have got more than 3, 4, 5 variables at a stretch that they've used for the research purposes. Am I audible to you, please?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now that's variables. Now we have different types of variables, because now if we have to encourage more scholars to undertake various variables for their study purpose, we should also know that which kinds of variables we have. For example, we have independent variables, dependent variables. Normally, the independent variables are the variables which can be maneuvered. We can tamper with them because these are actually the variables of interest, in the sense that if something happens, happening is outcome. Happening means outcome or a dependent variable. Suppose if employees are not satisfied, they are not satisfied because of several reasons. They become independent variables or antecedents to employees not being satisfied. We have to basically maneuver, we have to tamper with, or we have to do with this independent or an interesting variable. So if they are not satisfied, we have to find out the reasons. What are the reasons an employee is not satisfied? And if we are able to identify the reasons, that means we would be in a better position to take care of the satisfaction level of our employees. And if we have not been able to identify these antecedents, the independent variables, that why we say that they are antecedents and why we say that they are interesting. They are interesting in the sense that if we have been able to identify the reasons for a level of dissatisfaction amongst the people or the employees, and we find out the reasons for that. Reasons are independent variables. So the only thing that we have to do is that it is just like a doctor who is able to diagnose, who is able to gauge as to why a patient has got a, for example, fever, why he is in pain, why he has this kind of a problem. We say that this is the reason for it. Suppose if somebody is, again, we move back to the same issue of stomach being upset. If somebody's stomach is getting upset, and then what a doctor would do, suggest some, I can say, tests, and then also his own experience. He will dig deep into why the patient is, feeling upset. His stomach is feeling upset now and then. And then that means that he will maneuver with the causes. He might say that prevent taking this, prevent taking that, prevent taking that. So that is what you can maneuver with, because this is the kind of a variable which is very interesting for a researcher, and he can just tamper with it in order to, I can say, check. For example, if we talk about the level of employee satisfaction, we can check, we can improve it. Then we have to keep also in mind, since we have to encourage more than 1, 2, 3 variables, we might have intervening or mediating variables. We suggest that relationships do not exist spontaneously between two variables, variable A and B, or variable X and Y, X being independent variable, Y being a dependent variable. But there are some mediating variables that become a cause for this relation. And that variable is considered as a mediating variable. That variable that becomes a reason for the mediation. So X and Y variables are connected to each other because there is some mediator in between. Likewise, moderators. Moderators basically do not suggest any kind of a relationship, but they only talk about the strengthening or weakening of the relationship. They might strengthen the relationship, they might weaken the relationship between the variables. Likewise, we have got the control variables. Control variables are those variables which a scholar or researcher wants to keep at bay. He wants not them to play when it comes to doing a research on. So again, we have got the softwares available where we are conducting research, where we have demographic variables particularly. For example, you may take an example of the, for instance, the firms. You have got the sample, which are firms. Sample response or sample, the firms. And initially, what we can do is that if you have to collect data from 100 firms, you don't mind at the age of the firms, the size of the firms. But then subsequently, you find very interesting kind of research or the findings. What do? Is that you just try to control for the size. You just try to, control for the age. What does that mean? That whether a particular, for example, firm was in existence for how many years was in existence? What is the age of the firm? Lesser the age, maybe you may have different results. So control variables basically suggest that a researcher, after having collected data, can also resort to this kind of a segregation of the the firms. If he has taken the data from the firms, so he will segregate them into the ones which are, suppose, 1 to 5 years old, then 6 to 10 years old, 11 to 15 years old, 16 to 20 years old, in order to see that whether there is any kind of a variation in their profitability or in, for example, the quality of products, in many ways that he wants to study. That all will depend upon the study construct that a scholar has taken for the study purposes. Likewise, we have got some extraneous variables. Extraneous variables are basically those variables which normally are not taken care of, or they are also called as confounding variables, which are not taken care of by the researchers. But they have got an impact. They have got an impact. They will surely have an impact on the what we call on the relationship between the variables. For example, we may take the case of some COVID-19, for instance. In COVID-19, you better know it that the classes were being conducted online, exams were being conducted online, and what was required to be there, that student needed to have a smartphone and needed to have, I mean, an uninterrupted kind of a the power supply as well as internet supply. These were some of the basics that were required for conducting the online classes. But then, this being there, you just look at the grades that the students have got. You find that there is a huge, difference in the grades the students have got. Some have got good, some have got very medium, some have got very low, so on and so forth. But and then you try to make a conclusion on it, that these are the students who have done exceptionally fine, these are the students who have done moderately fine, and these are the students who haven't done anything good. They are negligible and ignorable. They have done nothing good. But so you conclude like this. But this conclusion may surely be impacted by the availability of the facilities to the students. Say, for example, those students who had no, I can say, internet access. Students who hadn't had a 24 or at least a few hours power supply, uninterrupted power supply. They hadn't had it. Again, possibility of results being impacted would be the educated parents or uneducated ones. The ones who had low grades were from amongst those particular households or families whose, I can say, families whose parents were uneducated. While as the ones who got the higher score were the families or were the households whose parents were very highly educated. So these particular variables might surely have the impact on the results that the students have got. So likewise could be the case in any organizational context as well. Now, if suppose you have a data to collect for years together, suppose in 2008, we know that what happened, there was a huge crash of markets in India also. And so subsequently at different points in time. So that had impact on the profitability of the firms as well. So if we do not consider these extraneous variables, means that the interpretation of the results would be very, I can say, faulty. It would not be accurate by any, I can say, means. That's why we have to keep in mind these confounding or extraneous variables that might have an impact on the variables, on the relationship amongst the variables. Now we move on to some important aspect, that is the mediating. If I am really audible to you, please.
Yes, sir, you're audible, sir.
Okay. Now look at this mediating. Since we say that we should promote and encourage the variables, the research on more than 3, 4, 5 variables. So naturally, in our research, we ought to have the mediating as well as moderating variables, or likewise control. The extraneous variables we have to identify. Now, what is basically this mediating or intervening variable? Normally, we say that it's a variable which actually is a reason for the relationship between two different variables, X and Y, independent and a mediating and a dependent variable. Because we have two variables, one we call as an independent, the other one we call as a dependent variable. So if they are connected to each other, not because they are themselves, but because there is a third variable we call as a mediating variable that plays a role in the relationship between these two variables. We have to dig out that, which one, whether it is or not. And for this purpose, Barron and Kenny, they have actually given some conditions in order to ascertain whether the independent variable and dependent variable are connected through a mediating variable. Now look at these 4 conditions that they have come up here. I don't know how many of you are aware of this Barron and Kenny's formula or a condition for assessing the what is called the mediating testing the mediators. Number 1 is that independent variables should be directly related to a mediating the independent variable significantly. Second one is that independent variable should be related to a mediating variable. That is called X should be related to M. The third one is that M, that's the mediating variable, should get related to the variable Y. And the fourth one is that mediating variable, once we add the mediating variable, the relationship between two variables should come drastically down. It should come down. These are the four conditions given by Bern and Kenny. And in case you will have question, you will ask me, or else I will move further. Exactly. When it comes to these four important conditions, there was a kind of a criticism on these four conditions. And that criticism was given by, or was, I can say, from Zhou, Lynch, and Chen. These were the three scholars who criticized these four conditions. They said that it is not a must for an independent variable to be necessarily affecting or related to a dependent variable. Possibility is that an independent variable can be related to a dependent variable through a mediating variable. Look at it. What I'm trying to convey is that if suppose we have variable X and variable Y, X acting as a independent variable, Y as a dependent variable, M is a mediating variable. Now, what does that mean? For example, X is a leadership style, and then M mediating variable is a employee engagement, and job performance is Y. Now, as per Zhou et al., what they say is that if leadership style affects employee engagement, and employee engagement in turn affects the job performance, we must say that it is the leadership style which is basically responsible for job performance, but through employee engagement. Means leadership style has not impacted directly job performance, but it has impacted the employee engagement. Let me give an example of a department, for example, or a college. Let it be a department, university department, where we have a head of the department and there are faculty members. There are students naturally or scholars naturally. Now, a normal course of action could be that once we find a head of the department or principal of a college, they're not directly related to the students. More directly are always the faculty members. Now, if a leadership style is such that it enhances the level of faculty engagement, faculty remains very busy in discussing, deliberating upon, in taking and engaging classes, in helping the students, in providing all the necessary logistics and facilities to the students. What is possible to happen? That students will surely have a higher performance in the exams and they will be more satisfied. There's an outcome variable. Outcome variable is the student satisfaction. Now, students are not satisfied directly by the approach of a head of the department or by the approach of a principal concerned, but the principal and head of the department played so nicely that he has had very good collaborative relationships with his staff, with his faculty members. In turn, the faculty members got so enthusiastic, so interested in their jobs that they provide and extend any kind of a help required by the students. Why? Because the teachers are so, we can say, behaved, or the teachers feel so happy about the atmosphere in a department that they give this kind of a, or they feel this kind of a atmosphere, which is reflected in the way they conduct their classes, they engage their classes, they engage with the students, they facilitate the students, they extend any kind of a help to the students. Am I audible to you?
Yes, sir.
So what I'm saying is that a possibility is that the independent variable, for example, the style of a head of the department is not basically impacting the students' marks or the satisfaction levels. It does impact it, but the concerned head of the department is influencing the psyche, the mind, the level of happiness and engagement of the staff. He is so behaving with them that they become so enthusiastic and so engaged at the workplace, which in turn is reflected in how they conduct their classes and how they extend their facilities to the students. That's what we say, that it's important that an independent variable, for example, leadership style, may not directly have any connection with the students, but via teachers, the concern of the department has been able to improve the level of satisfaction of the students. And you know that there was a research conducted long ago in 90s. Look at that, there are several situations where you find that there is an indirect impact on customers. For example, there was a research conducted which found that how employees deal with the customers, and how in turn this dealing impacts the psyche of the customers, and how these customers go on buying or merchandising with the company, and how they become the repeated buyers of that company, how that repeated behavior of the customers helps an organization to earn more and more profits, how their word of mouth actually is spread, and how other customers are also attracted by the we can say salespeople of the concerned firm. The point is basically we many a times take this, I mean, lightly, that we could basically be impacting the psyche of our staff through different means, and how that staff will ultimately have an impact on the psyche of the customers if we take it from the customer's perspective or a commercial organization's perspective. Point that I'm trying to convey is that Zhou, Lynch, and Chen, they came up with a very different formula. They say that it is not a must that an independent variable should necessarily be related to a dependent variable Y, but rather it is possible that independent variable might influence the mediating variable, and that in turn would influence the dependent variable. Now look at this. We have now some scenarios are there. 4 or 5 scenarios are there. We may not be able to do with them all, but at least 1 or 2 could be done if you are very attentive here. The first one is that employee training improves job performance through increased skill development. Likewise, there are 4 other scenarios. What I would wish is that if you have got a pen, if you have got a smartphone, and if you can somehow, formulate a hypothesis for 1 or 2 scenarios, we would be in a better position to know how we can do it and how we can proceed on with the rest 3, 4, 5 scenarios that are there. So it's not only that I have discussed about the mediating variable, but also equally important is that we get to know about how it is possible to actually formulate hypotheses practically. Now look at this, the first scenario, employee training, job performance, and increased skill development. Could you please tell me which variables are independent, which ones are dependent, which ones are mediating variables? Yes? If you are there, can you have your cameras on? So there are some scenarios that I have come up with, and I would wish that if you are in a position to draw or formulate the hypothesis for any of these scenarios, we can have a discussion also for a bit. And especially the first one, employee training, increase job satisfaction, the job performance through increased skill development. Which variables are independent, which ones are dependent, and which ones are the mediating ones?
Participants, please be interactive.
Yes, the first one is employee training. And which one do you think is the independent variable in this scenario? Any idea? What about employee training? Is employee training an independent variable or a dependent variable?
So it would be, according to me, it would be mediating variables there. Because that will increase the employability of an employee. If the employee is taking training, so not just the job performance is getting increased, but his employability is also increasing. That way it is mediating variable.
Anybody else who can just tell me something about this employee training? Look, as I said, that independent variable is a variable that becomes a cause for something. And bear this in mind, mediating variables also become a cause for a dependent variable. But the way this scenario has been created, it suggests that employee training is actually an independent variable. Because the employee variable training that improves job performance, and employee training is a variable that improves job performance through increased skill development. That means for employee training, both of these variables, skill development as well as job performance, become dependent variables. Both of them are a reason of employee training. So therefore, we may say that employee training is independent variable, job performance is a dependent variable. Since we use a word through increased skill development, that indicates that skill development is a reason that enhances job performance. So connection between employee training and job performance is via skill development. Therefore, all different training programs that are being conducted, they have a purpose. Per se, they might not improve something, which is a dependent variable, but they might affect that dependent variable through some other case, which is here the skill development. So we say that employee training is significantly related to skill development. Skill development is significantly related to job performance. Skill development mediates the relationship between employee training and job performance. This is how we can take employee training as an independent variable. Likewise, social media use affects political engagement through political awareness. Now it must be clear to you which particular variables are actually independent and which ones are dependent variables. Are they okay? Yes, please. Yes. Social media use affects the political engagement through political awareness. Which variable is a independent variable, which one is the mediating one, and which one is the dependent one? It's very clear. The same scenario, it is almost. And then in this case, we have social media use. That is again a variable that gives birth to political engagement, but it is not giving birth to political engagement directly, but it does give it through political awareness. That means people who make use of social media get politically aware. They get politically aware. Their political awareness hinges upon the use of social media. More they use it, more they get the awareness about the political scenario of the country or a nation concerned. And then that gives birth to what we call knowledge.
Sir, I think you are disconnected. Hello, Professor Nazir, sir.
So you're not audible.
Hello, Professor Nazir, sir. You are not audible, sir.
It seems sir has got disconnected, sir.
No, no, ma'am. Sir is in the meeting.
He's
Okay,
there.
okay, yeah.
We can see,
Yes,
no?
he's
It's,
there. Yeah, yeah, he's there, he's there. This audio video is not visible here.
Hello, Professor Nazir, sir. Whether we are audible to you, sir? Sir, you are not audible to us, sir. No, sir, you are not audible to us, sir. I think there will be some technical glitch from your side. You are not audible to us, sir. Hello, Professor Nazir, sir. No, sir, you are not audible to us, sir. I think we should conclude this session. Sir has disconnected due to some technical issue, and I have talked with the sir, so the time is already over. So I will thankful to all the participants, our course coordinator, Dr. Sangeeta Chaudhary madam, Dr. Nilima Dongle madam, and all the learned participants, those who have gathered here for this session. Thank you, participants, and we will stop now here and meet tomorrow with our tomorrow schedule. Thank you, everyone. Is there any questions, specific questions or the queries? So you can ask. Nazir sir, whether we are audible to you, sir? Hello, Professor Nazir sir.
I think he got disconnected.
No, ma'am, he is in the meeting, but I think some technical glitch will be there.
I cannot see. Yeah, okay.
Nadir sir, I think if you could permit, sir, shall we conclude because the time is already over, sir. Some technical glitches from your side. You are not audible to us, sir. Sir, you can just put the message in the chat box so we can read it, sir. No, sir, you are not audible to us, sir. Sir, you are not audible to us. You can just put a message in the chat box. Nazir sir, you are not, Professor Nazir sir, you are not audible.
Nazir sir, you are not audible. Like,
No, ma'am, I think what happened, he is also not able to hear us.
oh, is it? Okay, okay, okay.
Okay, so what we can do? I will talk with the sir, and we will stop now here and meet tomorrow
Yes,
with
sir.
our tomorrow schedule. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Professor
Thank
Nazir sir, for your spacious time and thought-provoking session here. And with the kind consent of Professor Nazir sir, I would like to declare that this session will be over here. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you,